Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today we're going to jump straight into business. What I want to share with you is what I believe is one of the most underrated watercolor painting techniques. The reason why I say it's underrated is because of just how frequently I use it in just about any painting that I do, and how versus how much it's actually talked about. Now, this skill is the ability to hold a steady, even wash from top to bottom while varying it and painting different details in different colors. And I know it sounds like people do talk about it, but I want to dive deeper on the idea of you actually have a lot of range of how many details you want to put in. Sometimes my first washes will simply be tinting the paper and barely having any details, and other times I'll actually include quite a lot of information in this wash. And what I want to do is show you that how I can keep it quite loose but still include quite a lot of information. So we're gonna get started top to bottom here, and I'm gonna mix this beautiful orange red for the rooftop, and you'll see me mostly using primary colors and probably not even mixing a lot on the palette. So we're gonna start here, just a bit of orange there, and I'm gonna use my Levinson brush, the large goat hair, and this is great because it is quite versatile, so it will allow me to get quite a lot of information in. I'm gonna mix in, or maybe let's say switch over, and let me just pre-wet this just a tiny bit. Gonna mix in a bit of blue there to get that kind of a shadow under the roof there. Now, I am filming this a little differently, so hopefully there aren't any issues. But I want you to see everything properly. So you see, while the edge is still wet, I'm coming back with some blue, and I'm simply touching the orange I placed earlier, and I let it flow together, okay? You have quite a lot of freedom when it comes to the areas you let flow together at this stage. Now, I'm gonna keep the blue motif, but I'm gonna add a bit more of my manganese blue hue here, keeping it quite organic, meaning I let it kind of mix with leftovers on the palette, which I absolutely love to do. And I find that it leads to much more interesting results. Now let's take just a bit of that Perlin red. Okay, the colors are French ultramarine, Perlin red, manganese blue hue, and cadmium red light, which is this orange you've seen me use earlier. And then I can feed it wet and wet while I paint this. And I'm not going to paint the whole scene, I'm just going to go over the building one time. This is a lovely view from a picture I took in Haifa up north. Beautiful city. Now here's something cool. So let's say you want to create a bit of a separation between this, what we have here. And of course we can come back and do some wet and wet, but that's not the goal here. I actually want this to be quite loose. Let's say you want to create some separation between this wash and the yellow I'm going to put in. So first off, you can absorb some of the leftovers to make sure they don't bleed too much. But let me show you how I like to approach this. I actually like to keep a bit of a gap going. I'm going to keep this light too. I'm not treating the values too seriously here, but I still want some of them to show. So I'm keeping a small light gap, and these two aren't going to touch each other. Now I do want some flow, so in some areas I will connect, you see? And it's these beautiful connections versus separations. Let's connect here as well. Let's keep it separate down the middle here. It's these beautiful connections that lead to interesting results. Now let's switch back to some orange, get this little roof. I will create even though it's a shadow, it's a pretty warm shadow to me because there's a lot of reflected light from up top, from down below, sorry. So there we go. Now look at this shadowy area. Let's use some of that manganese blue hue and really get it to be a little cooler there, to kind of quiet it compared to our warms. And you see, that's the very basic technique. That's how I do this. I try to, sometimes, you know, I like to exaggerate the color. So sometimes what I'll do is look for a color that really sticks out to me and just exaggerate it. So I'm like, okay, I feel like there's a bit of warmth here. Why don't we exaggerate that warmth, okay? Now I'm gonna take a bit of orange and blue together because I do want to darken this section up, like this. And then I'm gonna switch over to a little more of blue down here. Leave a bit of a highlight that is visible there. You can do plenty of wet and wet. So let's say I want to put in this more red kind of look into the window. Let's say I want to do this as orange as I actually see it in the reference photo. So let's orange it up. This is quite light, so why not? We can probably leave it quite just paper white without even doing any, you know, without putting any yellow per se. Oh, we can put yellow on the bottom edge. So you see there's a fold here, so we can yellow up this section and then this section and actually hint at some of the creases and folds in the fabric, right? And you just render the scene this way. You just move on from top to bottom, and what I want you to train yourself to allow yourself to do, okay, is to just observe. Right now I'm using plenty of water, which is the best advice I can give you for implementing such a technique. Use a lot of water. And what this does is it gives me time. So I can put in this kind of a wash here and really observe it and ask myself, does it need more warmth? Does it need more orange, right? And sometimes it's hard to navigate the painting, so you want to have that buffer, that time to think and figure out, am I placing things the right places? Am I kind of going out of line there and mixing shapes up that I shouldn't, you know? It's these things that really help the painting to look good and to look, I don't want to even want to say correct, but kind of compositionally correct. Right, it actually makes sense on a compositional level, and there's a good balance of focus in different areas, you know. So you want to give yourself that time, and what's the best way of doing that? The best way to give yourself that time is to use plenty of water so that it flows. You have a lot of reaction time, and you can decide, okay, it's going to be this here and that there. If you want to make it even easier, do what I do, kind of doing. Don't mix almost at all. Let it kind of mix on paper. Right? So if you don't mix, you have more time to react to what's going on. So just another kind of fun tip for you. Let's darken this up a bit, around here especially, and then drop this shadow here. And you see how it flows together. It just looks so cool. Now there are some details you can put in, so you can go ahead and kind of put these bars here that I skipped, right? And even though it started to dry, it still will look good, because I've used so much water in the initial stages that it'll actually still work. So now let me cool things off a bit with my ultramarine and start hinting at the shapes of the cloth here, or whatever that is. This faces away. You see, and as long as you maintain that flow, you will be able to create a beautiful wash. And again, just to reiterate the point from earlier, you have a lot of control over how much just how much detail you put in, right? You can decide to go very, very empty. Right now I feel like I'm pretty empty. I don't include too much, right? And how much you simplify and merge the shapes together. You have the ability to decide all of that. And I want you to take that power and use it. And decide, maybe I want to keep things super duper simple. Maybe I want to make them a little more complex. Maybe I want to do a lot of wet and wet while this is still drying. So you just grab your smaller brush, and maybe you see a pole or a stick somewhere, you know, just a ledge or whatever, and you just go ahead and you put that in like this, right? And maybe you want to darken a smaller area, so you go ahead like this. Maybe this window is darker, you go ahead over it like that. You can define a lot on the first wash, or you can leave that up to the next washes, right? And the way I'm gonna finish this one off, and I'm not gonna finalize it, it's just for fun, is by getting these beautiful awnings down like that. And maybe let's stack something that's a little more red right next to these blue ones. That's not even there, but it will lead to an interesting contrast. So let's get it like that. And then if you really want to make these pop, all you have to do, it's all about, let me switch over to my Escoda brush here. It's all about the shadows underneath. So you just get that shadow dark enough, and look at what will happen to the awnings. See? They'll start to turn into shapes. Darken this, connect, see, connection, connection, connection. And you have a lot of freedom within this process, right? So you can do things your way. You can do them really just the way you want to. and keep it as loose or as tight as you want. And look at what we created here. This is just a beautiful, beautiful feel to it. Very flowy, very fun. You could add the sky, or you could go ahead and just keep adding details here and there and really bring out the beauty of it. You could come back with some opaque paint to areas that have been dried already and kind of, you know, just do some touches. Make some areas pop if you want to. Make this edge pop, for example. See? Light against dark, all of those good compositional things. Keep the wash flowing top to bottom. Keep it as loose or as tight as you want. Don't mix too much on the palette. Let it do its thing on paper. In any case, once you add the shadows in the next stages, it's going to mute everything down. So you have a lot of freedom in that regard. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to do more of these where you see things a little better. You see everything, all of my setup and my face. Hopefully that helps as well. And I do want to tackle more beginner topics, okay? There will be a few changes in the next couple of weeks to the YouTube channel, but this is one thing I really want to do, is just tackle more beginner subjects, make it more accessible. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please leave a like if you have. I really appreciate it. Helps the video reach more people. If you can share it with someone you know will find it useful, that's hugely appreciated as well. And we'll see you again in the next one.